So now when we're moving on to the next stage of painting the sky and the sand, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to swap my palette, because when I'm looking at the reference image and my canvas and then to my palette, I'm jumping from like a mid-tone to a mid-tone to this white is kind of putting out my mixes. So now we've got the grey palette, which is a 5 value, which was the tonal ground value that we were after for the painting. It's going to be a lot easier for me to judge the mixes as we carry on. So I'm just starting with the blue and the white. When we take our value strip and have a look at the sky, it's darker than the value 5. That's nearly the 7. It's about the value 6. So we know that this palette is a value 5, so it's got to be darker than the palette. So that's really handy when we're mixing, because I can already tell that this is lighter than the palette, so I can just add more blue until I go darker value than the palette. Okay, that's looking good. So let's have a look on our reference. Let's even go a bit darker. That's looking quite a good value, but when I'm looking at this particular blue, this is an ultramarine blue, which is a red blue, and when I'm holding it against this reference, it looks too purple. So we're going to need something to balance out that purple. So we can either add yellow to it or get another blue that moves more towards green and yellow. So I'm just going to try adding a little bit of yellow to see if that will get us a colour, and if not, we can add a stronger blue. So this is a cadmium yellow light. So just with a tiny bit of that, just to speck onto your palette knife. It's darker on this side, but this side of the painting is looking quite close. It looks like it needs even a bit of red in it. So I could go with a burnt umber, but I'm going to add some alizarin crimson just so we can push more towards that red value. Because we've got that warmth here of the moon giving us that red here, you can see it's reflected very subtly in the sand colour. So this is the permanent alizarin crimson. I only want a really tiny amount. Maybe that was a bit too tiny, a bit more. Go a bit redder and a bit bluer. So it goes more turquoise over onto the right hand side, but that's quite a good base there. Let's paint it on and see how we get on. So here I've swapped to the filbert brush. This is a size 6 from Sepia High Flow Acrylic. Again, just dip it into the water a bit. We can also use the round brush for some of the details. It's a bit lighter near the horizon, so just a touch of white. And there's this very subtle cloud just in the distance. Then once I've got that base, I can start to kind of tweak it a bit, because it's easier to judge now I've got that in. And I can see a bit more of these purpley hues on this left side. And it's definitely going more towards that turquoisey colour on the right. So what I'm going to do is add a bit of phthalo blue with a green shade. So just a tiny touch, super strong this, in terms of its tinting strength, so you only need a bit to shift the colour. You can start to see when that comes in, you're instantly getting this turquoisey colour that we've got, which is just going to play nicely against that warmth we've painted down. And then blocking it in here, rather than using water, because if I use water now, I'll show you what would happen. See what happens is it goes, well, obviously very watery, but then this has got a tendency that it'll go down here onto the painting. We don't necessarily want that to happen on our painting, so we can take that back, and then I'd use a medium rather than water. So a medium will have a thicker viscosity to it, so it won't flow down the painting, especially when you're working at an easel. So I really love this one. This is an acrylic glazing liquid gloss from Golden Paints. And then just with a dry brush, just dip a little bit of the glazing liquid onto the end of your brush, and then you can work that into the paint. It just gives you this nice flow with the paint, and it won't come down the canvas. And just mixing the two blues together, the ultramarine blue and the phthalo blue, mixing those together, and we can use that first mix to lighten it up. Again, when you're mixing your colour, you can still keep on using this palette as a judgment to how light or how dark to go. I'm now like dry brushing over the top, so you get this layered effect with your sky. Just working that into the bottom of those clouds. You can use this same mix just to block in the reflected water in the foreground. And again, because we've got this warmth here in the sky on the left, we can then reflect that down in the bottom. It's just a greeny hue for painting in the far distance, just so it kind of smokes into that top sky. This is also an ultramarine blue. This is the one from Golden Paints, and I find it's got a bit more opacity and slightly warmer ultramarine blue than the Winsor & Newton version. So it just depends on the subject that I'm painting, but for blocking in these back mountains, just having that bit of extra opacity can be handy. And with this inky blue dark mix, I'm just having a look around any of the boats that could have a bit of that colour in. Then we're now just going to mix that more intense turquoise colour that we've got on the water. So to give it a bit of a glow, I'm going to have a thinner application that's more intense. Just paint that in to start with, and then I can knock it down on top of it. So making sure just to keep that bit of the ground colour in the distance to indicate the far beach. Actually, that's actually quite nice on there. I'll put a bit of the burnt umber in with it just to darken it. Give a bit of that sense of that kind of depth. And again, do a double mix between the two blues. Just to get a nice blue for these elements on the boats. There's also a slightly lighter shade that's reflected here into the water. now I think we can work on the sand colour. I'm going to take some of the burnt umber, add in some white. Again, looking for this mid value of the palette. And then let's just have a look at our value scale on there, and it's darker than the 5. It's nearly as dark as the value 7. That's quite surprising how dark it actually goes. So we darken that down, and then we can see how there's these reddy hues down here that we had before in the sky. So I'm just going to add a little bit of warmth to it. If we have a look at that on our scale, so that's looking pretty good for the value 7. Let's have a look. Feels very strong. So I think it needs to be more towards purple. So I'm going to add a bit of blue into it. Bad. It's looking better. That's great. So let's block him in and see how we feel. So again, it's just all a case of getting your first best guess for the colour that you're after, and then lightly blocking it in so you can actually judge it against the other colours. And then this bit here where it goes a bit cooler, I'm just going to dilute this just with a tiny bit of water, because I know that I'm probably going to be going over this colour, but it would just give me a guide. It's be quite nice for this blush on these boats. Then with the glazing liquid, I can see it definitely feels like it just needs to go greener. So now I'm just muting down that colour. So it's layered up again, just like we did with the sky. even start to put a bit more blue, a bit lighter here as we get closer to that water's edge. Now with that base in, I can then start to judge some of the colours on the reflected in the water a little bit more accurately. These little dashes of reflected light on the water that's on the sand can really help just to break up that pattern. And then at this stage of the painting, when we haven't got the masts in or the reflections or the actual moon in, what can happen is you might have a tendency to start overworking it and starting to think that you're very far off in your painting. But you've just got to have faith, and sometimes this can be a good time to have a step back and move your painting out of where you're painting it from, just to look at it in a different light. So I'll often use an empty frame that I can then just put onto the image and kind of take my reference away and just have a look at the painting as if it would be hung in a gallery. And it can just give you a bit of an insight into what now grabs your eye. And I can start to see when I've got this on, actually I could afford for that to be a bit lighter. And this reflection here, just to give more of that sense of light hitting the the subject. Okay, not much at all, but it just and also actually this line here, the beach at the top, I liked it with the ground colour, but it feels a bit too sharp, so I'm just going to kind of blend that in a bit. I'm going to add a bit more light on this edge as well. Okay, great. So now I just want to break up some of these blocks of tones that we've got. So to start with, just with some burnt umber, ultramarine blue and a bit of white just to grey it down. I just want to indicate some of these rocks. Quite randomly, and then I can make it a little bit darker. I'm just resting my little finger on the canvas edge so that then I can, it's easier for me to just pivot in and just do a little a dot on the canvas. It gives me a bit more of control rather than just hovering my hand. Now I've just swapped back to the acrylic marker just to guide me a bit with these lines of the masts. Now I'm going to take the smaller round and just enhance over the top of some of my lines. So to start with, I'm going to take some titanium white, and just when I mix the next colour, I'm just going to paint that on to give me a light background on it, just so it's got a kind of a glow behind it of the lightest colour. So now I can take some of the cadmium yellow light, touch of the crimson. Now if you've got a cadmium orange, you could paint it with that, because that will have an even higher chroma, so that will have a real intensity to it. But I just want to use the colours that we've got here just to start with. Okay, I'm going to leave that there for a while to dry off, and then use this same colour. You can see there's these buildings in the distance with lights on, and just with like a dabbing motion of the brush, we can paint on the highlight. You can vary the marks, a couple that are a bit lighter. Take the same colour down into the rest of the painting. Here it gets a bit warmer, so we can add a bit more of the crimson. And that again, now that's dried off, I can start to paint that a bit more intensely on the moon. I'm just looking around, see are there any other parts I can still add these lighter dashes of warmth. And there's a couple of buoys on the boats, and there's a couple of little light dashes onto the actual boats, like the rigging of the boats. And these can just help just to get that illusion of light hitting the subjects. So now I'm just going to have a look at the painting as a whole and just tweak its values really. It's anything that grabs my eye or anything that I might have missed. I mean, this area here, this feels a bit too bright. It's coming out too far forward in comparison to the highlight where I want people to look. The boat here on the left, I'm not sure what happened to him. I think he's been missed out, so I can just sweeten up the drawing on that and then just have a look around the rest of the image as well. And with some glazing liquid and some of the crimson and a bit of the yellow, it's going to create quite a deep red. I'm just going to wash that over this boat and where the light is hitting. So I've put a bit on, and then some paper towel, just kind of rub it back, and you get this nice sense of glowing light. With a very, very light, a very small amount of it, just a little bit on the lights over there and a little bit on the actual moon, just around the edge. Just help to give us that bit of a glow.